There are two strikes going on in Hollywood right now that have effectively shut the entire industry down. So obviously, recently the actors went on strike, but long before them, we had the writers went on strike. We're getting close to now 3 months since the writers have been on strike, and that's been pretty brutal. But it got even more brutal, more significantly brutal, when the actors then went on strike. Because even though the writers went on strike, productions were still going on, movies were still being shot, all kind of stuff. But when the actors went on strike, all that was done. It was all wrapped up. And now we're starting to see bubblings of a lot of frustration amongst people outside of the Writers Guild and the Actors Guild. You know, we've been seeing recent comments from like people in IATSE, people who don't have anything to do with the strikes. You know, the problems between the AMPTP and the WGA, or the AMPTP and SAG, they have nothing. They have nothing to do with any of those problems. But those people are currently out of work, and they can't get paid, and they can't pay their bills because you got the AMPTP and you got the other organization. They can't get deals done, and therefore a lot of other people outside of the AMPTP and the various unions are hurting and suffering. You're starting to see some bubbling frustration about that, especially when you've got, you know, we hear reports about months went by before sides even sat down. And now even places like Deadline are now running articles like this one, where they're saying, lock yourselves in a room and don't come out until you shake hands on a deal. Now, that's been going around. And listen, there's a lot of issues on the table. Some of them have a lot of nuance. Some of them are more straightforward than others. Some of them aren't as straightforward as they seem. There's a lot of complicated issues on the table. But the unfortunate reality is it's not just the immediate players involved that are being affected. There's a lot of other people in the industry being affected by this who they have no dog in this fight, and yet they're kind of getting hurt by it too. And so you start seeing stuff like this. It's in that context that last night, Ann and I had dinner with a director whose movies you would recognize if I mentioned them, and his wife. And as we were having dinner, I brought up the question, you know, the issue of the strikes came up, obviously because, you know, some of his stuff has been kind of delayed as well. And I asked him the question. I said, out of curiosity, why was it that you guys were able to, at least seemingly on the surface, so painlessly able to get a deal done with the AMPTP? And why were the AMPTP able to get a deal done with you when they see the AMPTP seems incapable of getting a deal done with like the WGA and SAG? And he said, you want to know the real reason? I said, sure. Now remember, this is one person's perspective. Many members of the DGA, this is but one person's perspective, who does not represent to speak for the entire DGA. But he said, do you want to know the real reason to know what he's talking about? I said, sure. He looked at me and said, SAG's deal was supposed to end on, I believe, June 30th. He goes, you want to know when they sat down and had their first negotiating meeting? Like, I don't know. I said, June 7th. So 3 weeks, their official leadership had their first official sit-down negotiations with the AMPTP, and the AMPTP decided to have their first negotiations with SAG 3 weeks before their deals was going to expire, before a tentative strike date. He goes, we have been sitting down with the AMPTP since last year. We've been meeting with them for over 13 months. So that when we got close to when we would have our deadline stuff, we had most of our issues. So we didn't settle them quickly, took a while. But we got to a place. And so that's why in the news cycles, you never saw a lot of DGA drama, because it's just, we had already worked it all out. He goes, why the AMPTP didn't have that kind of foresight and that type of initiative to get that stuff done with the others. And he said, you know, and he reminded me is, listen, a lot of the issues that we have, some are similar to what the DGA and the WGA have. A lot of them are very unique to just us. It's not the same deal. It's not like all three unions had the same stuff on the table and we were able to get one done and they weren't. Different issues altogether. But he said, I think one of the big things is the DGA was a lot more proactive, or maybe the AMPTP was more proactive with the DGA than they were with the other unions. But he said, we've been working on this for a long time. And so there was never any news stories. It's just that as we got close to the deadline, we were able to announce we signed a deal, because we've been working on it for a long time. So you couple that with the fact that You know, it was well over 100 days that the Writers Guild was on strike before the two sides even sat down and met. And listen, I don't give a flying fuck about, was that the Writers Guild's fault? Was that the AMPTP's fault? I don't care. You simply just had two sides not sitting down together. And that's fine if it's just affecting the two sides, but it affected everybody else as well. And the actors union has been on strike for a much shorter period of time. And, you know, hopefully progress is being made there and all that kind of stuff. And all this can wrap up shortly. But, you know, I have always been, not always, right around before the strike started with the actors, I got, the more and more I read about the SAG union leadership, it just made me wonder if they knew where they were doing. Not that they were not asking for the right things. That's not, it's just, but were they capable of getting the things that they're putting on the table and they want to get? And I don't know. And then hearing somebody from the Directors Guild tell me, look, we worked on it longer. They didn't. I don't know. Chris, I'm so happy you're here because you are a member of SAG. Mm-hmm. A member of SAG, by the way, before anybody thinks she's just a SAG stan, who has expressed some frustrations with her own union leadership in the past, right? So I think that makes you uniquely positioned to give some perspective of that. But when you sit back and look at the bigger question of, you know, why was it the AMPTP seemed to either have the motivation to, or the urgency to, or whichever descriptor we want to put to it, to get a deal done with the DGA, and yet they seem to be either unequipped, inept, unwilling, unable to get a deal done as quickly and as efficiently. Well, maybe it wasn't that quickly with the DGA, but seemingly on the surface as cleanly with the WGA or with your union SAG. What do you see some of the biggest differentiators there to people like myself and most people watching this who are on the outside looking in? What's your perspective on it?
One of the big things here that we have to remember too is, so the DGA is comprised of about 19,000 members and SAG is 160,000, just to compare those numbers.
Right.
The DGA has not gone on strike since 1987 and they did for 3 hours. Right. They historically have not been a striking union because they typically do these very thorough negotiations that seemingly go their way. 87% of members voted in favor of the AMPTP's things. Some people didn't like everything. Their AI stuff, I think, is one of the reasons why maybe things got sorted a little quicker. I want to make sure I get this language right. The studios did declare that generative artificial intelligence is not a person and cannot take over the duties of a Directors Guild member. But a lot of other people, I know one of the Wachowskis was saying that it's kind of still ambiguous language that they weren't crazy about. But it was a little bit more clear cut than studios saying they wanted to supplement for writers or to clone actors or do things like that. So I think that's a hot button issue that seemingly got solved a little more cut and dry than the rest of us. I also, and this is pure speculation on my part.
You're allowed to speculate.
I think the directors missed their opportunity to shoot the shot. I don't think they saw both the WGA and the actors striking, because I know members, again, like Lily Wachowski, member of the WGA, she was talking about how a lot of the AI things weren't great, a lot of the other things weren't great. And as a member of the Writers Guild, also had a different, unique kind of situation when it came to these different ongoing negotiations, right? So I don't know if things were as peachy keen for the directors as they could have been if maybe they were a little more intense, if maybe they were willing to go on strike. And I'm not a DGA member. I can't speak to all the ins and outs of what's all going on there. And I certainly can't speak to the ins and outs of being a director in itself. What a hard job. People, I think, assume it's just standing around looking important and pointing at things while everyone else does stuff.
Yeah, no, it's not.
It's so difficult and ridiculous. And my friends who do it, I am always just blown away by their ability to multitask and compartmentalize and lead and delegate, in addition to being artists. But I do think that they probably could have gotten a better deal if they had just foreseen this big break. There was a great article in the New York Times, back in July, I guess right around the time that the actors decided to strike, talking about, it has a whole bunch of different tweets from directors too. This is very much akin to kind of pandemic times in terms of work, right? Of just all of Hollywood being shut down. Yeah. And right now, no matter what deal the directors got, it's not being implemented. They can't do anything.
Right.
So I feel like, sure, they probably had some clear-cut things that made it easier to negotiate. Maybe to your friend's point, too, they had a longer kind of time to percolate and figure out things. But now, and hindsight's always 2020, now I'm wondering how great everyone feels about the deal they did accept in light of these other two unions striking. And my assumption is it's probably not 87% of them feeling as good about it anymore.
I don't know. I've only spoken to 3 out of the, how many members of the DGA?
19,000.
19,000 members of the DGA?
Let's go poll.
I've spoken to 3 of 19,000, which makes 0.0000001% of it. They all seem pretty happy. I mean, at least those 3 seem pretty happy with what they ended up with. Again, I just think you're going to find a situation, and I'm cognizant of this, that the WGA and SAG probably have a lot more in common in the things that they needed to bring to the table than, say, the DGA did. Guys, we want to take a second to thank a sponsor of today's video, Rocket Money. Did you know that the average person has around 12 paid subscriptions and they might not even remember to subscribing to half of those? If you have no idea just how much you're spending each month, you need Rocket Money. It's this great app that tracks all of your expenses so you know exactly where your money is going. I recently just found out that over 80% of people have subscriptions that they've completely forgotten about. Seriously, think about how many free trials you subscribe to that you just probably never canceled. And that's why I'm such a big fan of Rocket Money, because I was one of those people. When I signed up to Rocket Money, I was stunned to find out that a gym I had belonged to in another city I lived in, I had still been paying my dues to for over 2 years. Also, that music subscription service I use, I forgot I was subscribed to 2 other ones. That's where Rocket Money comes in, because Rocket Money is a personal finance app that finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps you lower your bills all in one place. With over 3 million users and counting, Rocket Money customers have saved on average of $720 a year. So stop wasting money on things you don't use. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and manage your money the easy way by going to rocketmoney.com/Campea. That's rocketmoney.com/Campea. rocketmoney.com/Campea. But I am curious about this one thing. So let me ask, and again, you might not be in a position to be able to answer this, but let me ask you anyway. So when this friend of mine brought up to me that the directors had actually started their talks with the AMPTP a year before their deadline came, and at least on public record, the AMPTP and SAG began their negotiations on June 7th, 3 weeks before the deadline. Why? I mean, everybody knew for a long time when that deadline was. Why wasn't the AMPTP and, say, SAG talking with each other in January? Why weren't they scheduling meetings in like before Christmas? Why did the two sides have to wait until literally the strike was within viewing distance 3 weeks away? And things looked so promising when they said, we're going to extend the deadline. And all of us, including me, was like, they're going to avoid this strike.
They're going to work it out.
But why
These
do you
crazy
think
kids.
like that these negotiations didn't happen in November, December, or January, and rather waiting until June 7th?
I honestly don't have a good answer for that. One of the great kind of glass half full things of the strike for me is I am learning so much more about my union. They're doing so many kind of Zoom meetings and town halls and things like that that are introducing me more to the inner workings of it. I am much more politically aware of my union than I was before, which is great because we have our election coming up and everything too. And I've always researched, but now I feel like I'm getting more in those trenches and learning more about it because it's, I've said it before in the show.
Well, it directly impacts you, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And in the past, I think I haven't been involved enough, honestly. And I say that as somebody who's voted on committees and been part of nominating groups and things like that. I've always assumed, I know what's going on, but I think it's also in the same way that I can take a kind of armchair expert backing to politics. Well, I know what I'm about, and I know that these people are about that same thing, so I guess I'll just vote for them. And now it's, much like any political thing, it's a lot more nuanced than that, and I really should focus on the minutia.
The one saving grace of this too, and it frustrates me, especially like with the AMPTP and stuff like that, that these deals are 3 years. Mm-hmm. Like, part of me wants to grab, like, when we've got friends of ours, like Ray and I have friends who are members of IATSE, and they have nothing to do with the strike. They're out of work. Oh, yeah. Because two other organizations can't get their shit together. And a part of me wonders, like, why can't the AMPTP, and maybe to a degree the WGA or SAG, but like, hey guys, these deals are 3 years. Like, can't you at least say to SAG, okay, look, we don't really like what you're asking for here, But you tell you what, if you agree that we need to revisit this again in 3 years, and by us acquiescing to you now on this does not obligate us to stick with it in 3 years, we'll give into this for now, and we can revisit it. So we like, why doesn't the AMPTP, or maybe even to some degree SAG or WJ, bring a couple of issues to the table and say, look, we're going to talk again in 3 years. We're willing to give into this to you that we are not happy with. If you'll give into this on us that we know you're not happy with, and we both agree that we'll sit down and rediscuss these again in a couple of years, just so we can get things moving. What's the holdup to something like that, do you think?
This is also great insight for viewers. If this is how John negotiates too. Look, this is not what I want. Can we come to a compromise here?
Let's discuss it again later.
Yeah, yes. We're going to come back to it, but let's talk it out. There are certainly a lot of issues on here that I think could go that route, right? Hey, maybe this amount of money, maybe this timing of this thing, maybe this percentage is something that we can work on. There's other things on here, though, that I do find to be, this has to be fixed right now kind of things.
Yeah, there probably are primary options.
Yeah, just because of the damage that could happen in that amount of time for certain actors, right? How far they could take the, artificial intelligence, likeness, cloning, that sort of situation. Some of the things on there, too, just involving actors of color being lit properly, having makeup and hair artists who can actually make them look the way they should look on camera.
Or train them properly.
Yes, and have that training available. That's still one thing that I'm just so floored by of, how is this a big ask? Like, you want your actors to look great on camera. That's one of the whole things. You're spending all this money to light them and show them and do it. Why wouldn't you get them a makeup artist who works? So there's certain things like that it's, that needs to be figured out right now. But other things, I'm sure, once we go back in there, well, I say I'm sure, I hope that we will have some of those moments of, there can be some give and take here, and we can revisit this later on without hopefully striking again that soon.
All that being said, like you and I think we were talking like last week, I think we're both kind of feeling like they all seem to have an end game. And like it seemed, I've been hearing things about September that hopefully that the people on both sides are saying, we think we're going to wrap this up in September. Yeah,
it's a Green Day song now. We're just wake me up when September ends. That's all we're hoping for. And that's what I keep hearing too. My makeup artist friends, oh my gosh, they're really struggling because, that's what they do full time. One of my friends was a key makeup artist for several Marvel movies. And it's, now I'm going to go file for unemployment, I guess, and figure it out. And she's doing all kinds of other side hustles and thinking of going to school for other things during this time, which is wild. Of this incredibly gifted, super sought after person is going to have to go back to school during this time. Nothing wrong with that, but right. Man, the actions of everyone else really just has this horrible trickle down effect. But I keep hearing it should end soon. It's just what we talked about before too, was the industry basically closes in November. Thanksgiving hits and all executives, all casting directors are like, I'm out. I'm going to go see my horrible family. Bye.
Yeah, hopefully this can all get worked out sooner rather than later. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching this video. Make sure you like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to our channel. And don't forget, we have a daily podcast called the John Campea Show podcast, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcasting app of choice. Go and subscribe to it today so it'll be there when you need it.